So I've been testing all the different rogue builds in the game, and today I want to go ahead and rate them based on how viable they are at speed farming and how viable they are at pushing. That's kind of the combination of criteria going into this list. And really, this is just kind of for fun. I absolutely think that there are definitely a ton of different perspectives out there, and I encourage you all to leave comments down below if you found a really good use that I may not have talked about during this video. And of course, who knows, I'm making this list now, but there's very possible that they're going to be having some nerfs by the time we really get more into the game. They already mentioned they're going to be coming out with some big patch. They said a chonky patch is what they specifically said. So who knows? We could see a completely different rogue and completely different every other class, but this is just mainly to kind of get some knowledge and share my experience with all of you, and just for a little bit of fun. Starting off with the Barrage build. So Barrage is one of my lesser favorite ranged rogue builds, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily bad. In fact, it's actually one of the faster speed farming builds because you can kind of drop Barrage and continue to move in some sense, whereas like penetrating shot, rapid fire specifically kind of keep you in place, spraying out all these shots. And so that is a very, very big advantage, but I think the pushing potential for Barrage is a lot less. You can combo it with a lot of other options, and in general, ranged rogue builds have a little bit more of an option to push because of them necessarily being ranged. So you can kind of kite out and abuse the fact that you're a better skilled player than the NPCs. There are some options with other builds, and we'll talk about that later, but I think Barrage is comfortably in the, I'd put it in the B tier here. I might move things around later on. I think Barrage is still solid, but not as good as some of the other ranged builds that I personally have used. Trapper Rogue. I know we have Twisting Blades on here and Trapper uses Twisting Blades, but I felt like Trapper Rogue is kind of its own build because it's not really focused on Twisting Blades necessarily. It's mainly focused on the synergies between the traps and how they pump up your damage of Twisting Blades because of the massive CC that you come out with and the grouping up potential. Before, if you had asked me, I would put this in S tier. To me, right now, I think they kind of comfortably sit in the A tier, and the main reason for this is their single turret damage, your Trapper Rogues, that is, are not as high as things like Rapid Fire or Poison Imbuement Twisting Blades. Heck, even Penetrating Shot can outpace the Trapper Rogue in a lot of single turret scenarios. And not only that, but also the cooldown reduction that you were able to get on the Death Trap and the Poison Trap and all your other skills from the Twisting Blades is severely reduced. So the viability of this build has been severely reduced as such. Still very good, still solid for lazy speed farming, but for pushing, I think that there are other better options. To be honest though, the Trapper Rogue, if you're looking to speed farm like tier 60s or so, you can easily do that, and it's very fun and very relaxing. Flurry, ooh, Flurry. I've been trying to make a Flurry Rogue work, and I still have some other options that I want to test, but to me, every iteration of the Flurry Rogue that I've seen later on in the game just lacks the amount of damage potential that I like to see from the Rogue. And so to me, this is our C tier build. I think it's good. I think it can be viable later on, right? But it's not nearly as good as these other options. It's actually a decent speed farming / tankier lazy option. But again, we have the Trapper Rogue, and to me, Trapper Rogue is just kind of a better iteration of Flurry, right? They kind of do the same thing. You jump into a pack, you drop your traps, you group up everyone forcibly and CC them, and you nuke them down. Flurry, you jump into a pack, you Flurry, because it turns into an AoE, right, with some of the other modifications, and well, you don't get to group up people. But what you can do is pair Flurry with Death Trap, which I have been trying, and that actually is a decent combo. But I've just found the Twisting Blades version with Death Trap is just better, and so to me, that ends up in C tier. Penetrating Shot. This one might surprise you. This one's going in S tier for me. Penetrating Shot is my personal favorite and most viable option for endgame ranged rogue builds, again, in my opinion. Mainly because of the viability of pushing high, but also actually a decent speed farming build. I know in my previous video when I talked about the best range rogue build and it was Penetrating Shot, I mentioned that the speed farming can be a little bit lackluster compared to Twisting Blades, and that is still technically true. but there are some modifications you can make to Penetrating Shot to make it a quite solid speed farming build comparable to some other things on this list, but also it is super good at pushing high tier. And that's what's really, really amazing about it. I've seen some people absolutely decimate with Penetrating Shot in higher tiers, and in fact, I was able to complete my highest tier with Penetrating Shot. It was an 83, but I didn't have like great gear, and with me swapping builds all the time, you're not going to have great gear. Next one is going to be Rain of Arrows, and ooh, have I wanted to make this work so badly. Rain of Arrows, this is the Word of Hakan build where you get all the imbuements on Rain of Arrows. This build is arguably one of the best speed farming builds in the game, because what ends up happening is you have such insane AoE DPS, and you can kind of drop it and move on if you have the proper DPS, because it applies Poison Imbuement, Shadow Imbuement, Cold Imbuement. So what oftentimes happens is I ran Twisting Blades plus Rain of Arrows so that you can reduce the cooldown. You proc Rain of Arrows, especially in group play for some of the later tier Nightmare dungeons. You can nuke it out a whole pack, move on to the next, and by the time you get to the next Elite pack, you nuke that one down as well. This means it's a pretty solid speed farming build, but it's definitely not amazing, and it's only good for speed farming lower tier Nightmare dungeons is what I should say, or just Jet dungeons in general, normal dungeons, because the damage potential is even lower than Trapper. It's kind of on par with Flurry a little bit, but the upside is that you get that massive burst and you still have Twisting Blades. So to me, it's a little bit better than Flurry, but still not amazing. Rapid Fire. Ooh, so Rapid Fire here, I'm going to put this one in A tier. I think Rapid Fire is really solid, particularly for nuking down single target entities, and honestly I might put it over the Trapper Rogue. I'm not quite sure. That one's a toss-up for me. I think the Trapper Rogue's a little bit better. Rapid Fire is very good. The problem that it tends to have is single target damage, or AoE damage. It has great single target damage. You can nuke bosses very easily. And so what oftentimes I did with the Rapid Fire builds was actually swap into Poison Imbuement for the bosses, but then Shadow Imbuement for the just standard clearing. And in fact, I oftentimes just sat on Shadow Imbuement for most of my Nightmare Dungeon clears, mainly because, well, you need a lot more AoE damage on the build. So Rapid Fire, very solid, and I'm interested to see what kind of competes. Is it the Poison Imbuement Twisting Blades Rogue, or the Rapid Fire Rogue that has higher DPS when you max out each build? Because the last build we have is the Poison Imbuement Twisting Blades Rogue, and to me, this is the quintessential best build overall on the Rogue. If I was rating just pushing, I would put this behind Penetrating Shot. If I was rating just speed farming, well, Penetrating Shot would be lower on the list, period. But for overall, Twisting Blades is going to just be super amazing. If you start to stack a lot of tanky stats on a lot of pieces of your gear, you can start to push, but it is a grind. You do have to require a little bit more investment than the Penetrating Shot Rogue, but the payoff is pretty insane. The amount of DPS that you can pump out just with Poison Imbuement and Twisting Blades is absolutely nuts. And that's something that you really don't want to underestimate. In fact, if you've looked at a lot of the builds that have tackled Lilith, Poison Imbuement Rogue is one of the few that actually was able to complete it very quickly, until we started seeing some gross like Bone Spear or gross like Blizzard Sorcerers just absolutely crush it. And, you know, we're starting to see that a little bit more often. So to me, Twisting Blades Rogue still the best, still the top tier one, but who knows, they could change this drastically and drop the Twisting Blades further down. One of the reasons why Twisting Blades Rogues is so good, by the way, for speed farming, is one, your melee that also goes ahead and refreshes the cooldowns, albeit not that much. It allows you to spam out your mobility options even faster, but also because you can hit and run. And what I mean by that is you stab the first couple of units, stab, Poison Imbuement, and you apply Poison Imbuement in a line as you dash through the whole group. You can easily clear out massive corridors of enemies with this Poison Imbuement Rogue. And in fact, my favorite dungeon to run with the Shadow Poison Imbuement Twisting Blades is Blind Burrows, which is just basically a bunch of small corridors, which you can kill off all the spiders with just basically one dash. Super amazing build. I think overall, I'm pretty happy with this list. To be honest, the Rogue builds are quite solid in general. Rogue probably has some of the biggest build diversity in the game, especially with the nerfs to Twisting Blades and the buffs to things like Rapid Fire. I could see, you know, Flurry and some other options being buffed. I don't really think that any of the builds here need nerfs per se for the rogue, because a lot of these things don't compete with Barb and Druid later on in the game. And in fact, you can even see like the Bone Spear Necro or even the Blizzard Sorcerer just absolutely decimating single target DPS on the bosses for like Uber Lilith. I don't think that these builds are unbalanced. Some of them are stronger than others, and if you want to nerf some to bring in power line with some of the other builds, I can see that. But to me, I just think that the things like Flurry, Word of Hakan, and Rain of Arrows and Barrage kind of need just a few buffs to kind of bump up themselves into S and A tier. I don't think there's any build here that's D tier or not passing. I think that you could run any of these builds and have reasonable success with them, but I do think some are better than others. Let me know what your complete thoughts are in the comment section down below. I thought this was a fun list, especially for my rogue players out there. Let me know what you think. What's your favorite build? What have you been enjoying the most? Thanks for watching. Sub to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you all for the next one.